sejam todos muito bem-vindos. É uma enorme alegria que o Grupo SEB recebe todos vocês para o lançamento da BIA, Bilingual Education Academy. E acredito que compartilhar é a grande palavra que define o momento que vivemos hoje. O compartilhamento, ele faz com que a gente consiga colaborar em escala, disseminar boas práticas e também permite, né, a apresentação de novas ideias. Tudo isso é o caminho para a inovação. Tudo isso é o compartilhamento de um ato de paixão que é educar, né? Que nós sabemos que o DNA do educador ele já vem com essa visão de mundo, de compartilhar, de dividir e de olhar para os alunos, né? Esse crescimento dos alunos como algo no centro. Então, o educador ele tem, por princípio, acreditar nesse mundo em evolução, acreditar nesse compartilhamento, nessa visão de um mundo de fato diferente, né? Essa é uma clara atividade. Educar, ele é um ato não só de paixão, ele é feito de pessoas por pessoas, então, portanto, ele é um processo humano, e nesse caso, mediado pela tecnologia. A gente entende que a educação bilíngue, no contexto que nós vivemos hoje, ela é fundamental, como sempre foi, mas tem tornado algo bastante relevante. A gente tem visto isso, não só nas nossas escolas, como também no mercado em educação no geral, né? A gente tem visto essa necessidade, esse mundo mais global requer uma linguagem mais global, requer ferramentas e instrumentos de uma educação bilíngue que permeia muito mais, né? Ela é muito mais ampla do que alguns entendem. Acredito que isso vai ficar cada vez mais claro e tem um impacto efetivo. E a BIA está exatamente aqui por isso, né? Ela está aqui para ampliar, para potencializar e para dar alcance desse novo movimento bilíngue para aqueles que ensinam e educam e conduzem o aprendizado de milhares e milhares de alunos. Nós do Grupo SEB acreditamos ao longo de 50 anos como o aluno no centro, compartilhando excelência e inovação. E nesse momento, a gente traz essa iniciativa da BIA, né, da Bilingual Education Academy, para colocar vocês, educadores, no centro. Porque permitir, explorar e potencializar a educação bilíngue de pessoas para pessoas, de educadores para educadores, que são grandes multiplicadores de compartilhamento de boas ideias, de conhecimento, é algo único e uma missão que, de fato, a gente acredita muito. Então, a BIA vem com esse dever. Eu vou passar a palavra para a pessoa que vem conduzindo esse projeto, né? E é um projeto bastante importante para nós. E eu queria agradecer a cada um de vocês que está aqui com a gente hoje nesse lançamento. Acho que é um movimento bastante importante e que nós temos muito orgulho de participar desse movimento. Então, eu vou chamar a Suza Clemchen, que vem aqui como nossa diretora acadêmica da Sphere International School, para conduzir a liderança, né, não só desse webinar, mas que vem trazendo aí com um brilhantismo todo esse projeto. Então, agradecer a cada um de vocês. Sejam muito, muito bem-vindos a esse projeto que é o BIA.
Estava mutada aqui. Muito obrigada, Tamila, obrigada pelas palavras, pela introdução aqui do nosso lançamento do BIA, Bilingual Education Academy. E muito obrigada também pelo apoio que você sempre nos deu nas iniciativas de formação de professores, e isso que nos dá força e coragem para seguirmos aí fortes com a nossa equipe, pensando no melhor para os nossos alunos. Anne-Marie, thank you so much also for joining us. We will shortly be with Anne-Marie. But before that, I would like to talk a little bit about the Bilingual Education Academy, how it came about, and the first course that we will soon be offering. Então, gente, vamos fazer essa conversa em duas línguas, né? A nossa convidada Anne-Marie, ela mora atualmente na Colômbia há muitos anos, ela é inglesa e fica mais confortável em fazer a fala dela em inglês. Enquanto isso, a gente vai fazendo essa mistura, né? Bom, gente, então, queria falar um pouquinho para vocês sobre o BIA. Esse é um projeto que surgiu, então, do encontro de profissionais, colegas das escolas bilíngues dentro do Grupo SEB, da Sphere, da Maple Bear, Conexia e também da Unidom Bosco. E a partir desse encontro, nós discutimos o que poderíamos trazer de qualidade, quais são as expectativas, o que nós queremos debater, discutir sobre os conceitos e as práticas em educação bilíngue. Então, nós formamos esse curso, esse espaço de formação e estudos, pensando muito em formação contínua, em cursos de curta duração, cursos livres, e também cursos de extensão, né? A gente deve inaugurar hoje o primeiro módulo, né? Nós vamos abrir inscrições para uma disciplina que se chama Aquisição Bilíngue e Cognição. É uma disciplina oferecida em parceria com a Unidom Bosco, e é uma disciplina que a gente já abre gratuitamente, né? Para essa turma inaugural, a gente abre como cortesia, e é um curso de 40 horas que pode ser realizado em até 2 meses e 60 dias, né? É no formato híbrido, então teremos videoaulas e atividades assíncronas e também discussões síncronas, com 3 aulas, 3 fóruns de discussão nas terças-feiras do mês de novembro, né? E esses detalhes, é claro que depois a gente passa para vocês, acredito que no chat, né, isso já deva estar acontecendo. Mas para voltar a falar um pouquinho do nosso contexto, né, de educação bilíngue, nós estamos num momento estamos discutindo muito, né, as denominações, as novas diretrizes aí, que ainda não foram homologadas, mas tudo indica que sim. Então, o que caracteriza a escola de o que caracterizam os programas de intensificação de língua inglesa, as escolas bilíngues com certificação internacional ou as escolas internacionais. Independentemente dessas denominações, nós nos preocupamos com a formação das pessoas que estão atuando na educação bilíngue de modo geral. Mais especificamente, a gente vai falar da educação bilíngue português e inglês, né? Que hoje está essencialmente, majoritariamente na rede privada, mas que daí a nossa responsabilidade em refletir sobre essas concepções e práticas para que a gente possa fazer uma diferença para a educação do país como um todo, porque eu acho que não é uma questão de se a educação bilíngue vai entrar também na rede pública, mas talvez quando, né? Eu acredito que isso seja um caminho muito sério aí para a educação do nosso país. Então, nós que estamos já com essas práticas, nós já acumulamos quase 2 décadas de prática com educação bilíngue. Eu acho que, de modo geral, esse movimento mais intenso, né, vem sendo realizado nas últimas 2 décadas. Isso é muita coisa. Nós temos um conhecimento construído aqui no Brasil, né? Nós temos referências importantíssimas vindas do Immersion Education do Canadá, do Dual Language nos Estados Unidos, CLIL da Europa, mas o que nós estamos também criando, construindo de uma prática em educação bilíngue que é feita a partir da nossa cultura, da nossa experiência no Brasil, né? Então, eu acho que o Bilingual Education Academy, ele traz essa oportunidade não só da gente fazer uma formação contínua, voltada para a prática, para o dia a dia, porque isso é, sim, muito importante, mas também abrir a possibilidade para conexões, para estudos, para a gente refletir sobre essa educação bilíngue ou multilíngue que está sendo construída no nosso país, né? Pessoalmente, né, eu vejo que as escolas devam se preocupar com a educação em 3 dimensões, né? Então, toda a escola se volta para a transmissão da informação, conceitos, conhecimentos, saberes. Sem dúvida, essa dimensão da informação, ela é bastante importante, relevante. Nesse sentido, a questão de conhecer a língua, né? As novas diretrizes também falam da questão da certificação em língua inglesa, enfim, tudo isso nós podemos discutir, mas é essencial também o conhecimento da língua e das áreas do conteúdo, dos conteúdos das áreas do conhecimento. Na escola, a gente se preocupa com as metodologias, com as práticas, com o desenvolvimento das habilidades, né? Então, hoje, mais do que nunca, a gente fala das habilidades, das soft skills dos approaches to learning, né? Então, sem dúvida, trabalhar com as novas metodologias, com a tecnologia em sala de aula, possibilitando o desenvolvimento dessas habilidades é importantíssimo. E tem a terceira dimensão, que se refere à estrutura do pensar. Como sabemos o que sabemos? Como que eu posso me preparar para poder ouvir o outro, analisar diferentes perspectivas, entender como o conhecimento é construído e a partir de diferentes epistemologias, né? Então, nessa dimensão do pensar, é que eu acredito que a gente tenha um espaço muito forte para o estudo da cultura e da interculturalidade. E é por esse motivo que nós fizemos o convite para a Anne-Marie para falar sobre a importância da compreensão intercultural, né? So now I will switch over to English. And I was just saying, I don't know how much Anne-Marie was able to understand this introduction, but Anne-Marie, I'm sorry, my Spanish is not very good, so I wouldn't risk trying to translate into Spanish. But the reason why we reached out to you is that we would really like to discuss the importance of culture and intercultural sensitivity in the context of bilingual education. And no one better than you to bring us some insights and inspiration into this topic. So I would like to introduce you to Anne-Marie de Mejia, who will now be speaking to us about intercultural sensitivity.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Susan, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be with you today, and especially at the launch of the Bilingual Education Academy. I've followed developments in Brazil for many years, and it seems to me that things are working out really well for bilingual education and bilingualism. I understand there's a new law that's coming out or just come out. So things are really moving in Brazil, and I'm very happy to see it. And I'm also glad to hear that this is a sort of bilingual conversation. I'm sorry I don't speak Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, but I hope that what I'm saying will resonate with you. I just wanted to say, just to situate this, that I began my career as a teacher of English in London. I am British. And then I came to Colombia for a number of reasons, and I started becoming interested in bilingualism and then bilingual education. And I was very happy to see again in Colombia the development of bilingual schools in the private sector and in the public sector, gradually changing ideas and changing methodologies, because as we all know, in English language teaching, for example, there's been great changes. It starts from grammar translation, then you went to direct method, where you couldn't use the student's home language. Then you went to the communicative approach. And then more and more people are now talking about bilingualism and bilingual education with different understandings, but the concept has become very popular, at least in Colombia, and I understand in Brazil. So what I'm going to talk about today is what Susan has introduced. Teaching language is not enough. I know that we all think, and it's rightly so, that we want our students to get to a high level of language proficiency, and that's understandable and very necessary. However, I think if we only concentrate on language, we are missing a very important dimension, which, as Susan has said, is how to facilitate, how to encourage, stimulate intercultural sensitivity. What has been said not that long ago, in 1993, Claire Cramsch was one of the first researchers to claim that many approaches to language teaching have focused on linguistic aspects, but really there have been the contact between discourses and language and cultures have been insufficiently researched. And so she says that it's important to focus on cultural understandings as not only a means of language teaching, but also as an end, as an aim in language teaching, and even more so in bilingual education. And another researcher, Dierdorf, has said that she's focused particularly on teacher education and the challenges of incorporating this vision of intercultural sensitivity, and how we can help teachers and students to become more interculturally aware. So we're not talking about knowledge so much in the sense of how much I know about different cultures, but how we can become more interculturally aware and conscious. We in Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, we decided to start a project by introducing a course on interculturality into the program on second language teaching and learning in bilingual education. So we did this in 2017 with 12 in-service teachers of English. They had come to do their masters in education. So what did we do? We wanted to find out how really they saw interculturality, how they related or not this with their teaching in bilingualism and language teaching. And so what we did was we said, okay, let's talk about these concepts. We discussed them. They read articles, they read chapters, and we presented them with a series of activities that they had to do, which were aimed at unpacking, deconstructing, negotiating meanings about stereotypes and their own perceptions on what teaching about culture means. And we started from them because we wanted to start from their understandings, where they were at. And we also looked at stereotypes, as I said, because these are often the unconscious or semi-conscious ideas we have of the other. So it's quite interesting to begin with this, we felt. So once we had, the students had gone through these activities, then we said to them, okay, you have to identify a topic which would be of relevance, obviously in relation to interculturality, in your own teaching context, so that they would be able to construct a pedagogical sequence which would be, and teach it, and then reflect on this experience. So they did so, and we were quite interested to see some of the topics they selected. We initially thought they would select topics to do with interculturality in relation to the US and Colombia, or Colombia and England, but some of them did, but others talked about interculturality in relation to living in the town and living in the country, rural and urban ways of looking at life and behaving, and this brought in grandparents, etc., changes. Also, another topic that was very interesting was gender stereotypes. One teacher focused her pedagogical sequence on run like a girl and the effect this had. Another teacher constructed something on ways of promoting peace, intercultural understanding and citizenship in conflict resolution in a public school. And also there was a student, a teacher who had lived in the States, and she constructed her pedagogical sequence around exteriorizing stereotypes about students in the US and comparing them with narratives of students in the US. So we had some very interesting and different takes, you know, on the subject. And we also had some very interesting comments and reflections, which I'm going to share a few of them with you now. It was interesting before I share this, just to say that most of them said that they hadn't really ever thought of these connections. They were very much looking at language and content areas, as Susan has mentioned, in CLIL, in the dual language, things like that, but they hadn't really looked at language and cultural contact. So these are some of the things the students said after going through this whole process. They said, one of them said that the reflection on the Intercultural project had made her more conscious of her identities relating to the different languages she spoke and taught. She said, the main responsibilities that I could reflect on were, who am I when I speak this language? How am I when I speak this language? And how do I feel when I teach this language? So you can see that she was questioning herself as a Colombian teacher of English, as a Colombian bilingual educator, and her different identities. Another participant emphasized the importance of not only extending the focus of interculturality and acceptance and understanding of difference to all language teaching and learning, but also understanding in depth how the notion of diversity influences different student involvement. So this teacher said, I firmly believe in the importance to work from every school, institute, and even private lessons towards the recognition and acceptance of diversity. Another said, a very interesting comment, he said, my training as an English teacher has been flooded with teaching techniques and influenced by the ideas and theories of Stephen Krashen. However, a new world was presented to me when the idea of interculturality was recently introduced. I conclude I've been exposed to the psycholinguistic debates of the field, but blind to the socio-cultural approximations. So, as I said before, teachers had accepted culture as something that was part of language teaching, bilingual education, but really hadn't thought much about it. Yes, culture's there, but no more. So what are some of the challenges that I would say as a result of our project we found face many teachers, bilingual education teachers? One is that it is very easy to stay at the level of external aspects, such as different customs, folklore, ways of dressing, music, without really asking why these differences have come about. And I was thinking recently, when I first came to Colombia from England, I was very surprised at how close people used to come to me. As an English person, I was used to keeping my distance. Of course, now with COVID, that is accepted anywhere. But at that time, I was very surprised that now I'm much, more used to it. But this was one of the things, distance, social distancing and distance, which is an intercultural aspect. And why do English people traditionally keep further away than Brazilian people, for example? So that is one challenge, okay, to stay on a superficial level and not really find out why these things are as they are. And another thing that we found was that for some teachers and students, this can be a very unnerving experience when you have to confront what you've always accepted as the way of doing something, and you come into contact with other ways of doing something. This can be very disconcerting and sometimes quite painful. So that has to be recognized too. You can feel threatened in your understandings. And a third challenge is that this can seem, it's easier to see differences. They strike you much more directly than similarities. Okay, so I'm going to finish now, and I just want to say that in Colombia, which has been my experience, the Ministry of Education has recently considered the importance of moving from the policy of bilingual Colombia, which began in 2006 officially, to a program of multilingualism, focusing on the construction of competences of global citizens. I think in my understanding, Susan also mentioned that, who recognize their own identities and cultures. And this is interesting because we're talking in the plural, identities and cultures. And I think this is an intercultural statement. And I'd like to just, in relation to that statement by the Ministry of Education, I'd just like to relate the idea of one of the participants in our study. And he said, bilingual teachers have an important role to play in these developments by helping to develop intercultural sensitivity in themselves and in their students, because a successful language teacher or bilingual teacher needs much more than technical ability. Teachers have the ability to reinforce and perpetuate hatred, or to stimulate diversity and inspire students to create a better world. I would urge teachers, bilingual teachers, language learners, to help stimulate the understanding of diversity through the development of intercultural sensitivity in an effort to create a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. That was wonderful. Anne-Marie, I'm so sorry because I think that I never actually introduced you properly or exactly where you are now based and doing your research. Anne-Marie is the director of the doctorate program in education at Universidad de los Andes in Bogota. And the reason why I went back to this now is just to emphasize how I believe it's interesting that you're here talking to us at the launch, the opening of our academy, because even though, of course, there are many differences between Brazil and Colombia, we are both, you know, countries in Latin America, in South America, and we also have a lot in common. So I believe that there is a lot that we can exchange and learn from you. A lot of studies that have been put in place in Colombia at the government level. We unfortunately don't have large-scale studies yet in Brazil, but I think your findings can also help us here in our context. One aspect that I don't know if this happens in Colombia or not, but when we talk about bilingual education, in our case here, we're talking mostly about English and Portuguese. It is very common for schools to look at the English teachers or the teachers who teach in English in the English program to be the bilingual teachers. And they have to do the bilingual and the intercultural and the additional language and all of that. And so how do you see the importance of integrating all teachers as teachers of bilingual education?
That's a really interesting question, and it's something that we have been focused on for quite a while. Through various studies, what we advocated was to see bilingualism, bilingual education, obviously as a transversal project of the school, that it wasn't, as you say, it's not just the English teachers who are responsible. Obviously, the Portuguese teachers, the content teachers. So what we suggested as a possible way forward was to form a department instead of just the English department and the Spanish, in our case, the Spanish department, but to form a department of, you know, languages, or a bilingual department, which would guide the development of bilingual education in this school, because, as you say, and it's not only that the English teachers are the ones that are responsible, but in our case, the Spanish teachers were seen as, oh, well, yes, you are, you know, sort of, they didn't feel part of the whole project. So I think it is very, very important at all levels of the school, the institution, that teachers are seen as part of a bilingual education project.
Right. Also, you mentioned this, a lot of the practice we have in bilingual schools and the teachers who are teaching additional language in bilingual schools, they come from this viewpoint of teaching language, right? That's the experience they've had. That's how they learned languages themselves. And so many of them never went to a bilingual school. They learned language at a language institute. And so there's a lot of these practices and also research that was done. You mentioned Stephen Krashen, and so there's acquisition, there's language acquisition and learning, and this idea that if we, in bilingual education, we learn language naturally, or we acquire language. What is your view on that? Just as a little introduction, in fact, to some of the discussions we will have in our module that we are launching now in November, the whole idea of acquisition and learning.
Right. Again, that's another very interesting question. And I go back to what you said earlier. I think I understood in Portuguese about the introduction of the immersion programs in Canada. And this, as I remember, was part of a sort of an idea that language, concentration on language, is not the only way, or not the best way forward. And so the whole idea of the immersion was to start looking at different areas, different content areas through the two languages. In Canada, it was French and English, but obviously in Brazil, it would probably be English and Portuguese. But so the content was the way of, in a way, taking the focus off the language so that acquisition in Krashen's terms could be facilitated. However, after the some of the evaluations of the program, of the Canadian immersion programs, it was seen that it was not only a question of acquisition, because many of the students were very good at communicating, but they didn't communicate very accurately. So then they had to look at ways of looking at language, well, not acquisition, but language development and, you know, for strengthening the language part of it. So I would say, yes, I would say that if we're looking at bilingual education, we're looking at communicating through two languages, not just through one or two or three languages, as in some schools. And we're looking at how to do this meaningfully, not concentrating on linguistic access so much, but looking at it through content, area, knowledge and meaning.
Right. So also counting on your expertise, your experience also with bilingual education in Colombia, and also with the policies, what is it that you would recommend? Because now we are assembling an extension course. We're putting together an extension course, 120 hours, that is something that should be, that is expected to be mandated in this new policy in Brazil, so that our teachers of bilingual education in additional language, they should have an extension course that will introduce them or further their studies in bilingual education. So looking at how children develop language, looking at the intercultural aspects or methodologies, what would be your say? I don't know if you have any recommendations for those of us who are interested in producing quality professional development and for bilingual education. What is it that we must have in our bilingual education courses for our teachers?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I'll give you some ideas. Obviously, they're not the only ones. I would recommend very much looking at Jim Cummins's ideas on the development of bilingual proficiency. I've always found that his ideas have been very powerful in helping people to see, you know, how that you don't need to teach another language to many in the traditional sense. You can help students to transfer much of what they know in their first language. You can help them to transfer to the other language. So if you're aware of bilingual processes, and this is something which is quite interesting in the States. Apparently they are now starting to think about how to evaluate bilingually, because up to now we've always thought of you know, proficiency in English with an English proficiency exam and proficiency in Brazilian Portuguese in another, or Spanish in another exam. So, but the question is now, if we are thinking of a bilingual program, but we need to teach bilingually and we need to evaluate bilingually, but that is something that is just it hasn't penetrated very much, but I think it's a very interesting development. The other thing is that I think there are one of the ways of helping what teachers and administrators to focus, to go forward with this idea of bilingualism is, for example, in Colombia, very often it's the science area which is particularly used in bilingual education. So, but okay, you may have a bilingual science teacher. That's very good. I mean, but very often you get science teachers who are, they have a bit of English, but not very much. So there are various ways you can go forward. You can get the science teacher, for example, the biology teacher or whatever, to work alongside the English teacher. Now, this means that obviously the English teacher doesn't teach science, but the teacher can reinforce through readings in English some of the subjects, the areas that the science teacher is teaching. So there are various ways of working together. Then there are other bilingual methodologies which can work. Team teaching is something which is a little bit like I've been talking about, or a methodology which where you have the introduction in English in the student's first language, then the main part of the course in the target language, and then an evaluation in the first language. So there are various ways of implementing bilingual education. It's not necessarily one particular way. And I think that very often, especially, well, in Colombia, I can't speak for Brazil, but there is the tendency of parents to think everything must be in English. If not, it's not bilingualism. So the idea also is to help parents and teachers understand that bilingualism is, as it says, bilingual. And so I think that's a really important idea, that we're not just focusing on one language. You know, we are developing both languages, because this also leads to the idea of, again, this was in the early days in Colombia, the important subjects were taught in English. So mathematics, science, economics were taught in English. Whereas what may be considered by some people as less important, religion, PE, were taught in Spanish. So this sends a message that, okay, you know, English is the important language, which is perhaps not what we want to portray.
Yes, and one of the aspects that is being pointed out in our new policy is the importance of integration. Now, of course, schools have different approaches, and so yes, some schools will be teaching science and math in English and maybe social studies in Portuguese. Those are important decisions that need to be made. There are schools that will have a more transdisciplinary approach, a more integrated approach. But in bilingual education, yes, we are talking about the bilingual child and this child and his or her repertoire, right? So it's this mobility, this ability to be able to use your language resources according to your audience, your circumstance, your context. And in that aspect, the importance of intercultural sensitivity, because the linguistic dimension will not be enough for you to create the mobility that is needed to be able to interact with people in different contexts in this ever-changing world that we live in. Yes.
I totally agree. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So Anne-Marie, thank you so much. I think that we are now reaching the end of our talk here. And I would like to go back to Portuguese now to talk a little bit to our viewers about the course that we are launching. I noticed that many people came in as we were talking, and so maybe it would be interesting now to go back and give an overview of the Bilingual Education Academy and the first module that we will be launching now in November. So before I switch over to Portuguese, I must thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I have to let everyone know that you were very kind because you have just traveled to England for the birth of your first granddaughter. So you have all of that grandchild. I said granddaughter. Yeah, we don't know yet. Your grandchild. And we are wishing your daughter and your family all the best.
Thank you so much.
And thank you. I hope to be able to invite you to more conversations as well with our students and our educators here in Brazil.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. It's been lovely to be able to talk about things that I've always found very passionate. I've been very passionate about. So thank you very much indeed, Susan.
Oh, it's an honor.
And good luck with the launching of the Academy.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. So, pessoal, essa então foi a Anne Marie de Mejia, especialista, uma das maiores especialistas em educação bilíngue, é uma referência importantíssima para nós que estudamos a educação bilíngue, e ainda mais nesse contexto, né, em que nós estamos na América Latina, ela pesquisando educação bilíngue na Colômbia, temos bastante em comum aí, conexões importantes que podem ser feitas, né? E agora, voltando a falar um pouquinho, então, sobre o nosso BIA, o Bilingual Education Academy, para quem entrou agora há pouco, é uma alegria enorme participar desse momento de lançamento, dessa iniciativa que surgiu, então, de conexões entre educadores que trabalham com educação bilíngue das escolas Insira, International School, Maple Bear, Conex Educação e a Unidom Bosco, né? Escolas do Grupo SEB. E a partir dessa junção, nós estamos aqui, então, pensando, elaborando, criando novas possibilidades de formação para os professores que atuam com educação bilíngue. E para inaugurar, então, o BIA, nós lançamos a primeira disciplina, né? É uma disciplina que atualmente faz parte do curso de pós-graduação em educação bilíngue oferecido pela Unidom Bosco e que fará parte também do nosso curso de extensão, que será oferecido a partir do ano que vem, né? Então, no início do ano que vem, teremos o curso de extensão de 120 horas, também porque estamos atentos aí às determinações, às normativas e à questão da formação que será exigida para os educadores que atuam com educação bilíngue. Então, esse curso vem atender a essa normativa, se for homologado, acreditamos que sim, que esse documento de diretrizes nacionais para a educação plurilíngue será homologado, e, de qualquer forma, nós estamos aqui para discutir, compartilhar práticas, concepções, perspectivas, dentro desse universo da educação bilíngue no Brasil, né? Então, no nosso chat, nós temos mais informações, o link para quem se interessar, nós temos esse primeiro módulo oferecido gratuitamente, aqueles que completarem terão os créditos validados já para o curso de extensão. E as vagas são limitadas, né? Mas a gente já vai sempre ficando em contato com vocês também por meio da lista de espera. Então, com isso, eu acho que encerramos, né? Encerramos esse primeiro momento e estamos muito felizes, agradecemos imensamente a presença de vocês, né? Eu vi de tantas partes do Brasil, cidades e escolas, e a gente espera, então, poder continuar com vocês conectados pelo Bilingual Education Academy. Uma boa tarde para todo mundo, e mais uma vez, então, obrigada pela presença, pela audiência de vocês, e seguimos com a nossa formação.